I was kind of a wild and crazy teenager. It was the 60s. I feel sorry for those people who weren't wild and crazy in those days.
Rock and roll went platinum in the 1960s and 70s, but behind the flashing lights and wild parties were famous groupies, whose lives were filled with shocking secrets, twisted tales, and dark endings that few ever saw coming. These are 15 of the most shocking examples. Number 15. Tawny Kitaen. Born into a family of mixed heritage, Tawny Kitaen's mother was of Scottish and Irish descent, while her father was Russian Jewish. As a child, Kitaen faced severe challenges with dyslexia, which ultimately caused her to leave Mission Bay High School. But undeterred, she found a calling in entertainment after attending a Peter Frampton concert at Balboa Stadium at the age of 14. Speaking of inspiration, have you ever wondered why Kitaen became an actress? After appearing in television commercials for Jack LaLanne's European health spas as a model in the early 1980s, Kitaen discovered her passion for acting. She started her acting career in 1983 with a minor role in the television movie Malibu. Then, in the following year, she played the lead role in the erotic adventure film The Perils of Gwendolyn in the Land of the Yik Yak, or just Gwendolyn for short. She was dating guitarist Robin Crosby at the time. Though Kitaen is most famous for her appearances in several iconic music videos, including Rat's Back for More and Whitesnake's Still of the Night, there are so many things about her that even her fans know nothing about. One of them is the fact that she had a year-long affair with football player, actor, and media personality O.J. Simpson. Yes, you heard that right. The affair was revealed at Simpson's 1997 civil trial, and the worst part is, he was married to Nicole Brown Simpson at the time. Think that's surprising? Wait till I tell you about the shocking stories leading up to her death. Kitaen married baseball player Chuck Finley in 1997, but their marriage took a troubling turn in 2002 when she was charged with domestic violence following an incident involving Finley. As part of a plea bargain, she agreed to attend a spousal battery counseling program and refrained from contacting Finley. Finley filed for divorce just 3 days after the incident. She faced even more legal trouble in November 2006 when prosecutors charged her with possession of 15 grams of cocaine found in her San Juan Capistrano home. To avoid a felony drug possession conviction, she entered a 6-month rehabilitation program in December 2006, leading up to the charge's dismissal. Did it make her more upright? No, of course not. She had more dances with the law, including several DUI incidents. Worse, she never changed from abusing drugs. She died at her Newport Beach home on May 7, 2021, at the age of 59. The cause of death? Number 14. Cathy Smith. Back in the day, Cathy Silverbag Smith was super famous. She was a Canadian backup singer, groupie, and legal secretary, but little did we know that she was also a drug dealer. Remember the fatal dose of heroin and cocaine that killed John Belushi in 1982? The dose was administered by Cathy Smith herself. She wasn't always that way, though. In the mid-1970s, Cathy Smith began a tumultuous 3-year affair with Canadian singer-songwriter Gordon Lightfoot, who was married at the time. Their relationship was marked by jealousy and violence, with Lightfoot once breaking her cheekbone in a drunken rage over other men showing her attention. His jealousy even led him to fire 2 musicians for flirting with her. After their affair ended, Smith moved to Hollywood and became a backup singer for Hoyt Axton. Through Axton, she was introduced to heroin and quickly became addicted to it. Soon, she eventually transitioned into a full-time drug dealer, supplying celebrities like Rolling Stones members Ronnie Wood and Keith Richards. She first met comedian John Belushi on the set of Saturday Night Live in 1976 and later reconnected with him through her connections in the music world. Then, in March 1982, Smith confessed in an interview that she was the one who injected Belushi with a lethal mix of cocaine and heroin known as a speedball at the Chateau Marmont. In her words, "I killed John Belushi. I didn't mean to, but I am responsible." This confession led to charges of involuntary manslaughter and multiple counts of drug administration. Though she initially fled to avoid media scrutiny, she was eventually arrested and returned to the U.S., where she pleaded guilty as part of a plea deal. Smith served 15 months in prison from 1986 to 1988 before being deported to Canada. Following her release, she worked as a legal secretary in Toronto and spoke to youth about the dangers of drug use. But the damage had already been done. She died on the 16th of August 2020 in Maple Ridge, British Columbia, at the age of 73, with little traction. Not even her former fans knew she had been on oxygen and in failing health for the previous few years. Shocked? Well, wait till you see who's next.
He's got 4 record contracts. I don't have to sell him. I mean, I arrange recording, I arrange gigs, I arrange the public.
Number 13. Nancy Spungin. Born in Philadelphia, Nancy Spungin easily had one of the saddest upbringings on our list today. She was diagnosed with schizophrenia at 15, got expelled from college, and left home at 17. She moved to New York City, where she dabbled in amateur music journalism and held retail jobs in clothing stores, but also worked as a stripper and engaged in escort services. Known for being a groupie, Spungin immersed herself in the rock scene and got affiliated with bands like Aerosmith, Bad Company, the New York Dolls, and the Ramones. During the peak of the punk rock movement in 1976, Spungin traveled to London, where she began a volatile relationship with the Sex Pistols bassist Sid Vicious, though nothing good came out of it. During their 19-month relationship from March 1977 to October 1978, Nancy Spungin and Sid Vicious became deeply addicted to heroin, with the latter already abusing various substances before they met. Poor Nancy was so out of sorts that tabloids named her Nauseating Nancy for her frequent public outbursts and antisocial behavior. The couple spent much of their time heavily immersed in drug use, especially heroin. Here lies the dark twist. In October 1978, Nancy Spungin was found dead in the Hotel Chelsea bathroom with a stab wound to the abdomen. The weapon, owned by Vicious, was discovered to be a Jaguar Wilderness K11 with a 5-inch blade. Vicious was charged with second-degree murder but died of a heroin overdose in February 1979 before his trial could begin. Though the case was closed after the bassist's death, various authors and filmmakers have speculated about Vicious's involvement, with some suggesting a drug dealer who often visited their room may have been responsible for Spungin's death. Got any interesting theories of your own? Tell us in the comments below as we unpack the hidden story of our next groupie. Number 12. Miss Cinderella. Back in the 1960s, the Sunset Strip in West Hollywood became a hotspot for music enthusiasts, hippies, and even cult members. Naturally, the area also became a magnet for groupies, especially the Girls Together Outrageously group, also known as the GTOs. The group consisted of only girls, all of whom were iconic in their own right. In the 2.5 years of being active, followed by one reunion performance in 1974, the GTOs had one album, Permanent Damage, which was introduced by Frank Zappa and released in 1969. 14 years before that, however, Miss Cinderella was born. But before we talk about the hidden story of this 60s star, can you remember any shocking story about her? No? Well, that's because Cinderella was the most reserved and least attention-seeking of the 7 group members. As a matter of fact, she was so elusive that she hardly ever appeared alongside the others in publicity materials. As far as her personal life goes, she married John Cale in 1971 but got divorced in 1975. Fans didn't know the reason at the time, but it's believed that Miss Cindy was cheating on him. Cale's lyric in his song Guts points to it. "The bugger in the short sleeves F-word my wife," referring to Kevin Ayers sleeping with Miss Cindy in 1974. Think that's surprising? You've seen nothing yet. Remember the story behind her death in 1997 and how the media went crazy? Of course you don't, because nothing was said about it. Nothing at all. Not even a sniff. Though Miss Cindy died in 1997, her death was not widely reported until 2007, when Pamela Des Barres mentioned it in her book, Let's Spend the Night Together. And guess what? Pamela Des Barres not only inadvertently listed the wrong death year in the book, but also failed to state the real reason why Miss Cindy died. Speaking of mysteries, you might want to hear the dark story of her fellow GTO member.
Miss Mercy, and you are listening to PNX News.
Number 11. Miss Mercy. Before her death from cancer at 71, Miss Mercy gave her full approval for a book that candidly details her struggles with drug addiction, 2 tumultuous marriages, her parents' death, and a strained relationship with her son, years of homelessness, and multiple instances of assault. Mercy's sarcasm, sharp sense of humor, and tough demeanor were only a mirage. She hated the idea of being seen as a victim, so she kept many painful experiences locked away and tried to downplay them. The worst part? Her suffering started early in life. Mercy's parents were perfect role models of a reckless lifestyle. Her father was a gambling addict and womanizer with delusions of grandeur, while her mother, struggling with depression, became hooked on diet pills that contained speed. She even gave her daughter the same pills because she felt Mercy was overweight. This led her to a life of drugs that blossomed into a near addiction. In one terrifying incident, a young French aristocrat named Jean de Berteuil gave Mercy a shot of heroin so pure that she nearly overdosed. Unbeknownst to her, he had previously visited Janis Joplin at the Landmark Hotel, where she had been killed by the same batch of drugs. Similarly to Miss Cinderella, Mercy's marriage was nothing to write home about. Her husband, Otis, was seeing another woman who, he made clear, he far preferred. The only good part about Mercy's life is that she became sober in her later years and even helped DeBar care for her elderly mother in her final months. She died after a long illness at the age of 71, and just like Cinderella's demise, the best traction of the news was from her former bandmate, Pamela DeBar. Number 10. Cynthia Dorothy Albritton. If we were giving awards to the quirkiest member of today's list, then Cynthia Dorothy Albritton, or Cynthia Plaster Caster, as she was so fondly called, would be a clear winner. Born in Chicago, Cynthia Albritton rose to fame for the craziest of reasons. She was an artist who had a penchant for casting organs, especially male phalluses. She later expanded her subjects to include filmmakers and other types of artists, eventually amassing a collection of up to 50 plasterworks. Her collection included Jimi Hendrix, Wayne Kramer of MC5, Pete Shelley of the Buzzcocks, and Jello Biafra of the Dead Kennedys. Think that's crazy? Her coming-of-age story will blow your mind. In the late 1960s, Albritton immersed herself in the free love and rock music subcultures while studying at the University of Illinois, Chicago. During an art class, she was tasked with creating a plaster cast of a solid object that could retain its shape. This sparked her idea to make life casts of an erect male organ, which would naturally soften and release from the mold. Jimi Hendrix was her first celebrity client. Ironically, Frank Zappa, yes, the Frank Zappa, patron of Miss Mercy and Miss Cinderella's GTO, found Albritton's casting concept both amusing and inventive, though he declined to participate himself. Enchanted by her work, though, he supported her and moved her to Los Angeles. Remember the 1971 burglary at her apartment? It was Frank Zappa who arranged for Herb Cohen to safeguard her collection of casts. That being said, it's safe to say the Cohen-Albritton relationship ended terribly. She filed a lawsuit against him in 1993 because Cohen wouldn't return the cast he gave him for safekeeping. Interestingly, she got all but 3 back. Living well into the age of 74, Albritton died from cerebrovascular disease at a care facility in Chicago on the 21st of April, 2022. Before we go into the next groupie on our list, did you know Albritton actually ran for mayor of Chicago? Yep, she ran on the hard party ticket, but lost.
It was 1965. There were war demonstrations and...
Number 9. Cleo Oer. If you think Albritton had a shockingly quiet end, wait till I tell you about the harrowing story of Cleo Oer. Her death was so hushed that you'd almost think it was a conspiracy. Raised in Manhattan, Cleo was the daughter of Rena Abelson Oer and textile company president Larry Oer, who passed away when she was only 16. She later attended the Franklin School and Quintanos School for Young Professionals before starting a career writing about the music scene for a Greenwich Village newspaper. Renowned as a super groupie by a 1969 Time magazine article, Oer recorded an album called The Groupies that was basically made up of interviews with her and some friends describing their adventures bedding rock musicians. In the early 1970s, Cleo Oer explored Europe and the Middle East while working as a model. In one of those trips, she immersed herself in the hippie lifestyle of Anjuna, Goa, India, including its vices. She abused all kinds of drugs, including an extensive intake of heroin and cocaine, and was part of an international drug smuggling ring just to make money. These experiences, coupled with her 2-week imprisonment, inspired her second book, Goa Freaks: My Hippie Years in India. Thankfully for Cleo, she was able to get her life back on track. Upon returning to the United States in the late 1970s, Cleo Oer underwent drug rehabilitation at Daytop in New York. She then pursued higher education, eventually earning a PhD in anthropology from the New School for Social Research in 1990, with her dissertation focusing on the escort chain in Thailand. Disillusioned with life in New York, Cleo Oer returned to Goa in 1999. However, some of the remaining old-time hippies resented her due to the attention her book had brought to their community. She passed away in 2001, alone and, frankly, with little media coverage. If not for a close friend, Cookie, who had stayed in contact with Oer during her final days, the cause of her death would have remained unknown. Oer's doctor pinpointed the cause of death as a stroke caused by high cholesterol and severe circulatory issues, for which she had been receiving treatment. Number 8. Miss Christine. Secretary to Frank Zappa, muse to Alice Cooper, and a member of a pioneering all-girl band, Christine Furka, also known as Miss Christine, was a glamour goddess icon to the Laurel Canyon music scene. She was also one of Frank Zappa's protégés, and she was even featured on the front cover of Zappa's Hot Rats album. Yes, the lady peeking over the edge of an empty swimming pool is Miss Christine. Being Alice Cooper's girlfriend in the late 60s, Miss Christine is often credited with creating the Alice Cooper look. While that is likely just a rumor or a fanciful tale, the GTOs were known for dressing up the Cooper boys like life-size Barbie dolls, and it's certain Miss Christine had some influence on Alice. Alas, Christine Furka tragically passed away on November 5, 1972, at just 22 years old. Was it her long-term battle with scoliosis? Or perhaps the fast groupie life she lived? Certainly not. The wild-haired style genius with an eclectic taste in musicians had a deep amphetamine addiction. Though many accounts suggest heroin was the cause of her death, citing a needle found in her arm, the official report attributes it to an overdose, likely from a combination of phenobarbital and quaaludes. In any case, though, Miss Christine Furka passed away before she had the chance to grow old, leaving her story shrouded in mystery nearly half a century later. Unlike others from her generation, who often reshape their wild pasts into polished hippie nostalgia, she isn't here to rewrite or reframe her life. Instead, her legacy lives on in scattered fragments, stunning photographs, hazy recollections, and brief mentions in books and online. What's real and true is left to the eye of the beholder, but what we do know is that her life was anything but normal. She was always the tallest, skinniest, and most awkward among her peers, often dealing with pain. Diagnosed with scoliosis at 12, Christine Furka spent the next 4 years wearing body cast from her hips to her shoulders, as described by her half-brother James Cerici in biographical posts. She would wear the cast for 6 months, then be given a break for a couple months before the cycle resumed, but unfortunately, the treatment was ineffective. Her time in the GTOs was as epic as it was exhausting. The GTOs were rebellious women who broke free from 1950s gender expectations, embracing a wild lifestyle as they mingled with musicians. But just as the band name stood for Girls Together Outrageously, Furka's behavior became reckless as time went on. Her drug use resulted in 2 arrests, one of which took place in early 1969 when police, passing by the landmark, observed her injecting heroin through her bathroom window. 3 autumns later, and Christine's demons finally got the best of her. She had traveled to Cohasset to visit her boyfriend, David Robinson, the drummer for the Modern Lovers. The band had a low-key, straight-edge lifestyle, which was a contrast to the wild scene Miss Christine had been accustomed to. She had promised not to bring any drugs with her, claiming she had cleaned up. But despite her promises, the bandmates found her unresponsive the morning after a late-night conversation. When they found her on the floor, Robinson and the others attempted to resuscitate her with mouth-to-mouth and chest compressions, but it was too late. Furka had died of an overdose.
1 week
deposit on the fittings and the fixtures. Plus, I should have a banker's reference.
Number 7. Anita Penberg. When it comes to mid-20th century's influential it girls, look no further than Anita Penberg. The Italian-born beauty's features carried her all over the world as a model in the 1960s, and she met and besotted several Rolling Stones, inspiring songs such as You Can't Always Get What You Want and Gimme Shelter. At the same time, the magnetic muse made her imprint in films such as Barbarella and Performance. But life for a woman who was variously labeled as a rock and roll goddess, an evil seductress, and a wild child, the latter of which Penberg nicknamed herself, was more complicated than any of those titles would imply. Her parents were Arnaldo Penberg, a German-Italian sales agent, amateur singer and painter, and Paula Wiederhold, a secretary at the German embassy. Sadly, though, the family was separated during World War II, and she never saw her father again until she was 3 years old. Expelled from school at the age of 16, Penberg moved to Rome, where she mingled with the Dolce Vita crowd before returning to New York City. Before settling in London, Penberg worked as a fashion model in Paris and studied medicine, graphic design, and picture restoration without even completing a degree. Not impressed? How about the fact she was fluent in 4 different languages? Famous for her romantic involvement with the Rolling Stones band members Brian Jones and later Keith Richards, Penberg first met the band in 1965 while modeling in Munich, where she began a 2-year relationship with Jones. They experimented with drugs, which caused Jones to suffer from nightmares. Curious about how she dumped him to date fellow band member Keith Richards? Penberg split with Jones in 1967 after he became violent during a trip to Morocco, where he was later hospitalized. Richards intervened during the assault and took Penberg back to England, where they began to hit things off. In any case, though, Penberg, just like many of the women we've talked about thus far, was heavily involved in drugs. Matter of fact, Penberg once pled guilty to marijuana possession following a heroin arrest in 1977. She was convicted and fined several weeks after Keith Richards' arrest. Health-wise, Penberg battled hepatitis C and underwent 2 hip surgeries, including a replacement, which left her with a limp. After detoxing in the early 1980s, she stayed off drugs, but relapsed later. By 2014, she reported being 14 years sober, but according to an interview she gave in 2016, the once iconic figure boldly stated she never expected to live past 40. Given that Penberg wanted to go peacefully and quietly, she probably takes solace in the fact she died at age of 75 without a lot of noise. The next woman on our list, though, was a total train wreck. Number 6. Edie Sedgwick. Ladies and gentlemen, please keep your tissues close by. Gen Z Hollywood fanatics may not know much about Sedgwick, which is a shame because she was very talented. She was an actress, model, and socialite who starred in several Andy Warhol short films during the 1960s. She was dubbed an It Girl and named a Youth Quaker by Vogue magazine. Despite being one of the most prominent figures in entertainment during her time, Edie Sedgwick struggled with profound personal demons. She came from a wealthy, troubled family with a history of mental health issues. Sedgwick battled addiction to drugs and alcohol as well as anorexia. To manage her condition, she took diet pills, which functioned like amphetamines, suppressing her appetite and stimulating her nervous system. Don't even get me started on how her fear of being alone, possibly linked to a personality disorder, made her increasingly dependent on depressants throughout her life. She combined alcohol, barbiturates, and benzodiazepines to form a mix that kept her sleepy, disoriented, and frankly forgot the pain of her loneliness. She broke with Warhol in 1966 and attempted to forge an independent acting career, but years of drug use and excessive alcohol had already deteriorated her mental health. In March 1967, Sedgwick began what may have seemed propitious, but in fact began her torturous and final decline. The filming of Ciao Manhattan, a semi-autobiographical underground film co-directed by John Palmer and David Weissman. During production, she accidentally set her room on fire at the Chelsea Hotel and was hospitalized with burns. She also halted filming thanks to her worsening condition from drug use. After additional hospitalizations for it and spells of mental health issues in 1968 and 1969, she returned to her family's ranch in California to recover. However, she was hospitalized the following year, this time in the psychiatric ward of Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital following a drug-related arrest. On the night of November 5, 1971, Sedwick attended a fashion show at the Santa Barbara Museum, followed by a party where she drank alcohol. Before falling asleep, her husband gave her prescribed medication, only to find her dead the next morning. Her passing was ruled accidental, with the immediate cause listed as probable acute barbiturate intoxication due to alcohol, a sad end to a woman who could have defined an era. If you've made it this far, then chances are you're having a swell time, so why don't you hit the notification bell while subscribing so you won't miss out on any of our amazing videos. It's a win-win for you. Number 5. JoJo Lane. Born Joanne LePatry in Boston, Lane's walk to fame began as a strong follower of the Beatles. Matter of fact, her nickname JoJo was coined from the letters she wrote to her #1 model, Paul McCartney. Who would have guessed that this little girl's future would place her not just alongside her idols, but within their inner circle? Yes, JoJo Lane's life was as vibrant and tumultuous as the rock stars she surrounded herself with. After her modeling career peaked with an entrance into the pages of Vogue, it didn't take long for her striking good looks and charm to catch the eyes of the leading men in rock. JoJo became a muse, confidant, and lover to legends such as Jim Morrison, Rod Stewart, and Jimi Hendrix, the latter of whom she famously recounted betting backstage. During her rock chick years, JoJo Lane consumed absurd quantities of drugs and alcohol and remained seemingly unfazed by the premature deaths of at least 2 of her former lovers. If that wasn't enough to point out Lane's hedonistic desires with rock stars, her whirlwind romance with Wings guitarist Denny Lane is a brighter beacon. Why, you ask? JoJo Lane married Denny Lane in 1978, and the couple purchased U Corner in Sussex, famously tied to A.A. Milne's house at Pooh Corner. The home became infamous for Lane's wild parties. That same year, tragedy struck when her brother, a drug addict and schizophrenic, shot their father during an argument in Florida. Though her father survived initially, he was paralyzed for over a year before passing in 1980. The incident strained her marriage, with Denny having an affair with her best friend. JoJo turned to alcohol and antidepressants, filed for divorce, and began a brief affair with Randy Rhoads, which ended tragically with his death in a plane crash 6 months later. Struggling with heavy drinking, she entered a tumultuous relationship with Peter O'Donoghue, having a child together. Their relationship ended amid violent conflicts. Say what you will about JoJo, though, but she was a fierce woman who never let anyone make circles with her. She had an audacious personality that was only matched by a tireless, creative spirit, producing covers and original music, often tinged with the chaos that marked her personal life. Despite her resilience, though, the toll of years immersed in drugs and alcohol left its mark. She was diagnosed with liver cancer, which left her aging quickly. It was at this point she regretted her hedonistic ways, admitting she wished she could change the past in a candid interview. The fatal blow was a shocking tragedy, a domestic accident by falling down a flight of stairs in 2006. She succumbed to her injuries at just 53.
I will not change the way I dress because people don't like the way I dress, you know. I don't shave my legs. They've made such a bloody big deal about the fact that I don't shave my legs. Give me
If there's one thing Linda McCartney taught us, it's got to be the fact that appearances can be flat-out deceiving. On the outside, Linda was the incarnation of perfection, a devoted wife, loving mother, talented photographer, and passionate activist. Yet, beneath this polished exterior was a woman as complex and flawed as the next person. Her walk to fame began in the mid-1960s when she began her career as a budding photographer. She started small, as you'd expect, focusing on the era's vibrant music scene. Luckily for her, Lady Luck came calling early. She got a job at Town & Country, where she had the opportunity to take pictures of the industry's biggest and brightest. Her legend soon preceded her. In the late 1960s, she was already a familiar presence at New York's Fillmore East, where she served as the venue's unofficial house photographer. Did you know that she was the first woman to feature on the cover of Rolling Stone? Her photographs, praised for their raw authenticity, have been displayed in prestigious galleries and museums like the Victoria and Albert Museum and have been immortalized in several books. Beyond photography, Linda explored music alongside her husband, Paul McCartney. They even recorded Ram and went on to form Wings in 1971. She also loved animals and became an ardent animal rights advocate. But for all of her strengths, Linda's personal life was just as fascinating as her career, if not more. Her first marriage was to Melville C. Jr. in 1962, but their differing lifestyles led to a divorce in 1965, despite sharing a daughter. She met Paul McCartney down the line, with whom she reportedly shared an immediate bond. Legends say Paul was smitten by the casual, unpretentious demeanor of Linda, who had him feeling more relaxed and down-to-earth. As funny as that sounds, Linda was more than just Paul's muse. She was an anchor during turbulent times. She helped Paul overcome his sadness after the Beatles' breakup and was the key reason why he continued his musical journey. However, tragedy struck when Linda was diagnosed with breast cancer. Despite aggressive treatment, the disease metastasized to her liver, and she passed away at the age of 56 on April 17, 1998, surrounded by her family. Her ashes were scattered at the Paul McCartney farm in Sussex, a serene resting place for a remarkable soul. One lesser-known fact about Linda: she openly enjoyed marijuana, calling it pretty lightweight compared to hard drugs. Her arrest for possession in 1984 sparked headlines but also revealed her flaw, proof that she was only human. Coming next is a pick that might surprise you.
Does that worry you, that the fact that, you can't go anywhere with him?
No, not really. I just sort of enjoy.
Number 3. Maureen Starkey. Of course, you remember her. There weren't a lot of women in the industry who had a radical life and fame. But what you probably didn't know are the shocking secrets about her life that have so often been kept hidden. She grew up in Liverpool as the only child of Florence and Joseph Cox, a ship's steward. But even as a teenager, she displayed her rebellious streak by turning her school uniform into a makeshift frock and paying a friend to teach her how to smoke. By 14, she had left school to work as a hairdresser, soon earning the nickname Mo among her friends. Life started slow until a fateful turn when she met the Beatles as a regular at the Cavern Club. Although Ringo Starr, whom she affectionately called Richie, didn't initially notice her, their paths eventually intertwined. Their relationship was initially kept hidden to protect his image, but hit its first rock when Maureen was threatened by jealous fans. That was only the tip of the iceberg. The couple's lives changed forever in 1965 when Maureen discovered she was pregnant. This made her marry Ringo in a hasty ceremony arranged by Beatles manager Brian Epstein at just 18. Despite the whirlwind nature of their union and the intense media scrutiny, Maureen chose to stay out of the limelight, refusing interviews and focusing on her family. Yet, life as a Beatles wife was anything but peaceful. While Ringo toured the world and starred in films like Help, Maureen was left to navigate the pressures of fame and the growing strains in their marriage. The cracks became evident as the Beatles disbanded in 1970. Ringo's escalating infidelities and struggles with alcoholism pushed their marriage to its limits. The ultimate betrayal came when George Harrison, Ringo's bandmate and close friend, confessed his love for Maureen, leading to an affair that shocked even John Lennon, who described it as virtual incest. She tried to save the marriage, but it was already over. The couple got divorced in 1975, much to the sadness of Maureen. Though she later remarried and found some solace, life came back at her harder when she was diagnosed with leukemia. Despite her family's best efforts to save her, including bone marrow transplants, Maureen passed away in 1994 at just 48 years old. Paul McCartney wrote the masterpiece Little Willow for her. Number 2. Sable Star. Rock and roll's history is filled with dark tales of drugs, hedonism, and alcohol, especially during the 1970s. This era also saw the rise of the wildest groupies in rock scenes. They were called baby groupies, known for their provocative style and connections to rock's biggest names. Sable Star isn't just one of them, she was the representation of the darker side of the rock and roll era. Born in 1957 to a rich family from Los Angeles, Sable's debauched life began at a shambolically young age. She was going to clubs as a teenager and spent nights in Hollywood's Sunset Strip nightclubs. To make things worse, Sable Star ran away to New York to live with her lover, but her mother reported her as kidnapped, leading to the arrest of the New York Doll's entourage. Their relationship quickly deteriorated due to drug addiction and Johnny Thunders' violent behavior. Star later became pregnant, prompting Thunders to propose, but she rejected him and chose to have an abortion. Interestingly, Sable Star later reflected on their toxic relationship, explaining that Thunders' behavior left a lasting impact on her identity and sense of self. She felt that being with him had stripped away the essence of who she was, leaving her a shadow of her former self. Don't take this to mean that the real self of Star was any good, though. Nasty rumors have swirled that Sable Star had erotic encounters with nearly every major rock star of the era. Among her alleged favorites were Led Zeppelin's Robert Plant and Jimmy Page. The crazy part is that fellow baby groupie Lori Maddox reportedly warned Star to stay away from Page, claiming him as her own and threatening drastic action if Star pursued him. Though Sable Star's infamy grew as every new celebrity in Los Angeles sought her out for the city's best party spots, Star shocked the world in the early 1980s by leaving the groupie lifestyle behind. Sadly, she passed away at 51 from a brain tumor. While her life highlights the dark realities of the 1970s rock scene, it also reflects a complex story of youthful rebellion and societal pressures. What could be worse than a groupie journey beginning at a young age whilst living in her family home? Check out who's next. Number 1. Barbara Cope. When everyone from Jimi Hendrix to Led Zeppelin to the Rolling Stones sings praises about one groupie, you've just got to raise your eyebrows. Barbara Cope, better known as the Butter Queen, was a notable figure in the legendary groupie scene of the late 1960s and early 1970s. She allegedly had intimate relationships with numerous music legends, including Mick Jagger, Joe Cocker, David Cassidy, and Jimi Hendrix, all of whom she left a lasting mark on. David Cassidy declared that he preferred her company to spending time with his TV family. Elton John noted that they got along famously, and Led Zeppelin's Robert Plant dedicated Dazed and Confused to her during a performance in 1973. So this leads us to the burning question: what exactly made Barbara Cope so special? As befits such an iconic figure of the rock scene, not a lot of details are known about the life of Barbara Cope. But what we do know, though, is that she had a fairly normal youth. Then, in 1965, Cope attended a concert in Dallas and immediately became captivated by rock music and its musicians, the latter of whom she yearned to sneak backstage to meet. Cope claimed to have visited 52 major U.S. cities and traveled to 11 countries while following bands. She retired from the groupie lifestyle in 1972, but later revealed on the Oprah Winfrey Show that she had slept with around 2,000 musicians. Though Cope continued attending concerts amidst her retirement, Cope faded into private life until she hit the news in January 2018 for a devastating reason. Firefighters found her collapsed on her porch after a neighbor rescued her and her mother from a house fire. While her mother survived, Cope, at 67, did not. These 15 women lived a fast life, enjoying the rock scene in its fullest glory. Yet they died either abruptly, quietly, or as a result of their excessive lifestyle. If you found this video intriguing, be sure to press the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Craving more hidden Hollywood secrets? You're just one click away. Grab a snack and dive into the next video on your screen.